Terve, welcome to another episode of Finding Finland with your host, Rudy Owens, the podcast where we talk about all things Finland. Welcome to another episode of the Finding Finland podcast, and today I am joined by a relative, Gail Bilto. Hi, Gail.
Hi, Rudy.
Terve. Tervetuloa. So, welcome to this podcast. Thanks for joining. And so just thought something I always start my shows with, just describing who our guest is and how we're connected. So for the folks out there who are maybe listening, Gail is one of my relatives who's a cousin of my mother. And so we got connected last year before I went to Finland. And so it's been fun catching up with family and those Finnish connections. Hi, Gail.
Hi, Rudy.
So this for this episode, when I contacted you, I said I wanted to just learn a few more about your wonderful stories about the Finnish family in Upper Michigan, and you have these great stories that I learned about. So maybe you can just give a little bit of a connection or just a little quick family story of the Finnish side of your family. You have obviously you're, I think, what, 100% Finnish?
100% Finnish, yeah.
Okay.
My Bilto family comes from the Turku area, I think. And then grandma comes from where you know where she comes from. She comes
South Ostrobothnia.
Comes from the Turku area. The Bilto family was farther north in Finland along the coast, and now I don't remember the name of the town. But they all connected in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
Okay.
And Hancock. So that's where everybody came together. And
okay.
Grandma and her sister, Grandma Hilma Turn, I think is her maiden name. And her sister Aldolfina, who is commonly called Fina, and they came with their father, which apparently I didn't know this until just a few years ago. They came with their father and maybe their stepmother, I'm not sure. And they went to the Upper Peninsula. The girls wanted to stay there. My great-grandfather wanted to go on. So he went on to Colorado or
Wyoming, right?
Yeah, wherever he ended up. I don't even know. I just recently, not many years ago, got a picture of him, a photograph of him. He's a very handsome man. But the girls stayed in the Upper Peninsula. They wanted to stay there. So Grandma and Fina, Hilma and Fina, stayed in Hancock, Houghton, that whole area in the UP, where the Upper Peninsula, the Keweenaw Peninsula, juts out into Lake Superior, which is the largest freshwater lake in the world. And that's where they lived. And that's where Grandma lived. She would come down. She lived with my family when my father became ill. And he died when I was just short of 4 years old.
Right.
And Grandma moved down. We had to move in with my aunt and uncle. We had the upstairs apartment kind of my aunt and uncle's house. And Grandma would stay with us because my sister's 5 years older than I am. I was only 4. So when about the age of 5 or 6, I started staying up north with my grandma all summer.
And we're talking Hilma.
Yeah, Hilma. And this is the late 40s, like 48, 49.
Okay.
And they would, my mother would go up there and spend a week because she was working. And so that was her holiday. And we always had to go berry picking while my mother was there. So Grandma would have strawberries so she could make strawberry jam on her wood burning stove. And she would get up at like 3 or 4 in the morning to start.
Gail?
So she would jam, and it became my job as I got older, and I would carry wood from the woodshed up to Grandma's wood burning stove and dump it behind the stove. She had a little a box for this for the wood. And then in the summer, she would have a load of wood delivered to the backyard. And it was my job to put the wood into the woodshed, pack it into the woodshed. So it would take me maybe about a week, and I'd work on it for about an hour or two a day. I couldn't work on it all the time. But I learned a great deal about spatial relationships, how to stack wood so it doesn't fall over on you, or you pick up a piece and everything goes to hell.
Okay.
And that was one of my jobs, and probably my only job.
All right. So,
then,
okay. So at that time, okay, what decade are we talking about here where you were doing these chores with your grandmother?
What?
What decade was that? 1940s?
It's still probably in the late 40s, early
Late 40s. Okay.
Yeah,
so,
early 50s.
So I learned that Hilma, because of my trip to Finland last summer, from letters that were sent by her and John,
Yeah.
the son of her first marriage,
Right.
that she was not a U.S. citizen in the early as World War II or the Winter War continuation wars were starting. So do you know when she became a citizen?
I haven't a clue. I didn't know that. I didn't
Yeah.
know that.
I think she was maybe a permanent resident, but never finally a citizen. So I think she, for whatever reason, that's what I learned in this letter. She had written in Finnish, and then our relative Merja, who's my distant cousin, your distant relative too, translated it for me into English, and it was just really surprising to know that she had been here from like what 19, I forget the year, was it 1903, I think is the year she immigrated.
They came in the early part of the 19th century. I don't
Yeah.
know when. She was probably about 14 or 15, or maybe not, maybe even younger than that,
Yeah.
when the girls decided to stay.
Yeah, so she was born in 1886.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the family tree right now, just next to my computer.
Yeah.
So that would have mean she was what, 17 maybe?
Probably younger than that, because she got married when her first marriage, she must have been like 15, 16. She had my Aunt Alice, and she was pregnant with her second child when her husband was out drinking in a boat with a buddy, and the boat overturned and they drowned. Well, she immediately, I think, pretty much married my grandfather, Isaac Nelson. And your grandmother, Winnie, my Aunt Winnie, once said to her dad, "Pa, why did you marry Grandma? Why did you marry Ma?" And he said, "I saw this redheaded woman walking down the street in Hancock, and I always wanted to marry a redheaded woman." So
Okay.
that's what he told Winnie.
Okay. All right. But well, at that time, I've looked at census information at that time. So I've downloaded census data that you can find online and have the census pages, so you can make a copy, like a photo copy, like as a downloadable photo image of all the people. So I found the listings for the family with the children, and with your mother and with Winnie listed, and the households. And then on this one page of about, what was it, 50 names, more than half, this was 1920, more than half the people were Finnish and were speaking Finnish at home in Hancock.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, both my parents spoke Finnish. My father was also Finnish. They spoke Finnish at home because what happened was they wanted to teach my sister, who's 6 years older than I am. They started to teach her Finnish when she was around 2 or 3, and she started to stutter. So they dropped the Finnish, because my father was a speech professor at Wayne University. He spoke the speech therapist, which at the time they called speech correction.
Okay.
he was a speech therapist, and he was head of the speech therapy department at Wayne University in Detroit. So it looked kind of bad that his child was stuttering. So they quit the Finnish, and that's why none of us, and we never learned Finnish because of the stuttering factor that my sister developed. So I never learned Finnish, but and grandma never really learned English that well, but she got her point across. You know, it was sit, eat, you know, that kind of language, you know.
So throughout her life, she was still struggling, or she was still like definitely a second language English speaker.
Oh yeah, definitely. She seldom, in Finnish, I think this might be true, that there is no he and she.
Yeah,
Everybody's a he. So she called everybody he.
yeah. I think the gender neutral pronoun is han in
There's no,
Finnish.
yeah. And so, and every day she would get a Finnish newspaper, and I don't know if, I think it either came from Finland or maybe it was produced in the UP. I don't know.
Yeah, there were multiple newspapers published in Hancock. There were, I think, at least two newspapers plus some religious publications as well from the churches. So there was quite a number of papers that were published in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Michigan that were in Finnish
Okay,
language.
she would get her daily paper, and around, you know, maybe 3 o'clock in the afternoon, she would lie down on her couch and she'd read the paper. And as she read the paper, she'd spread it out across her body. And when she was through, then she would take a nap with all this paper just covering her body. That was her cover. And then of course the paper would have to go into the stove, you know, because it was a wood burning stove. So that's how she lit the stove, where she had her newspaper.
Okay. So
Yeah.
so we're talking the 1940s. So by then, grandma, your grandma, my great grandmother had been widowed because her husband died.
Early. My mother was around in her late teens when he died. So that was in
So
the
he was in his let's see what year. Isaac, that's Isaac Nelson.
yeah.
And I'm just looking again at the family tree. Isaac Nelson died in 1934, so during the Depression.
Okay.
So
So
I
it was
think
my,
he was 59.
yeah. All right. Yeah. Then my
So
mother,
I outlived him.
what's that?
I've lived longer than him.
We all have. I mean, come on. I'm 81. You know? So
Yeah. It's a
yeah.
shame that you die so young and you can't see your grandkids.
Had stomach cancer. Uh,
Ah,
I think that was how he died. He didn't work the mines, but he did something along the coastline. This is where I'm not really sure.
I found again, I found more census stuff. I think it described him as working at a shipyard, working in somehow in like someone who provided oil that fed furnaces or the ship. So he had some sort of dock job near where maybe some of that iron ore was shipped out from or the copper, I mean, was shipped out from.
Yeah, there were copper factories. The copper factories was they were in Ripley, right along the water.
Yeah.
And by the time I was up there, they were closed. But we would go swimming in the disgustingly dirty water, and the sand. It wasn't sand. We called it stamp sand. It was black. It was black sand. It was really gross, and probably we shouldn't have been in the water at all because of the pollution. But of course, my mother would always go swimming there, and you know, we would all, there was a dock,
So
and everybody would jump off the dock and, you know, swim around.
so did you know that the relatives that like grandma, I mean your grandma Nelson and John, did you know that they were writing letters and sharing photographs with the family in Finland?
No, I didn't know that. But my aunt Violanda, Auntie Vi, would go to Finland later, probably maybe in the 60s. She would go to Finland every summer. She was a
Wow.
she was a music teacher, so she had the summers off, and she taught in a high school. And and she would take the summers off and go to Finland and rent a cottage on the lake and compose music. That's what she would do with her
Really?
summers. And while she was there, she would look up, she would go to the church that probably, you went to, and get information about the family, about who came from where, and all that stuff. And so, and related back to very early stuff, and related back to my, to my mother, who was very interested in genealogy, and she was the one who really sat down and created a family tree, although
Yeah.
much information was really wrong, as it turned
Well,
out.
it's
She was dealing with, she wasn't dealing with the internet or anything,
no
like
one
that.
was.
No one was, yeah. So
Wow.
she,
I mean, I think that's remarkable that the family was able to do that. So Vi is the wife of John.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
and when she was going back to Finland, had John passed away? Was he alive, or
No, he was alive. No, he
was he
was
going
alive.
with her?
No, she went by herself. You know,
Really?
yeah, she'd take off for Finland, and because she wanted to commune with nature and write her music. That's what she did.
That's a fascinating story. So do you know where she went when she did these trips?
No, I don't. I don't have
Well,
any.
maybe, did she stay with family? Do you know? Did you hear?
No, I don't think so. I think she had her own little cottage on the water, and then she would go to Turku to look up at the church record and find out what was going on with it. That's how she got some of the information and conveyed that to my mother. So,
Okay. All right. That's really interesting. Well, I've been to Turku. It's a really interesting city, and that's, Turku's here, and then the furthest north is South Osterbothnia, where the family and had lived in those villages for a number of years. The Torn family. So
okay,
so
okay.
that
My father's family came from Oulu, which
yeah,
is
okay.
the coast. Yeah,
That's further north. That's right near the Swedish border.
yeah,
Oh, interesting. Okay, so you're closer to Lapland. That was closer to Lapland.
yeah, yeah,
All
yeah.
right. All right.
Yeah.
So so the, the the years that do you remember, like the first years that you visited Hancock? Do you know how old you were when you went up with your family?
Probably about 6 when I started to
Okay.
stay with
So
grandma
so
in the
this
little.
is after World War II has ended?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I was born
Okay.
in 1943.
Okay.
So when was I 6? 43, 4, 5, 6, 47, 48, maybe 48 or 49. I was either 5 or 6, and that was 48 or 49. But
Okay.
when we crossed the straits, and it was still just boats, there wasn't a bridge. Once you cross the straits, it was like going back 40 years,
Yeah.
in the Upper Peninsula. It was just, I mean, I lived in the big city of Detroit, so, but they were primitive up there, And in fact, every Saturday, or not every Saturday, but once in a while, we would go with a grandma's friends, John and Annie Kangas, would come by in their 1930 something Ford Model T and pick us up, me and grandma would squeeze in with them in the front, and they'd put me in the rumble seat, and I would be there with the food and the towels and the clothes change and everything. And we would speed out at about 35 miles an hour out to somebody's house along the canal. And they had a sauna, so we would go to the sauna. And all the ladies went to the sauna first, and then the gentlemen would go after. And
Okay.
but the sauna was so hot, I couldn't stand it. I would always be on the floor. I'd be kneeling on the floor. And grandma, I can't it. It's too hot in here. And she'd go, she'd scrub my hair and she'd blush my body. And then I was free to get out
Did
there.
you have the Vata? The
I didn't, but she sure did. And she would stay like an hour, and she'd come out totally, totally pink. Her whole body would be pink. And then we'd go up to the house, and the ladies would go up to the house and set out all the food that they had. And I was the only child. And of course, I didn't understand Finnish, and they'd all sit around and talk Finnish. All the women in
Did
the
you all jump in the water? Was there cold water immersion, or did you have water nearby?
Oh, no, no, you could jump in the water. You could go jump in the water if I could do that when if my mother was there, or I could do that, but I couldn't do it when I was until I got older and I could swim better. But you know, when I was little, when I was 5 or 6, and
Did the adults jump in the water that you remembered
I
after
don't
taking
think so. I
sauna?
don't think they did. They just kind of, you know, I don't think grandma ever did anyway.
Huh.
Um,
So
but
so was this so it was a wood burning stove in the sauna and the smoke
oh,
was outside. It wasn't a salvo sauna, so it was not a smoke sauna. It was a sauna where the smoke was taken outside the sauna, right?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, wood burning stove, wood burning.
And
And
was there chairs or just like benches that you would
and
sit on?
benches, yeah, a couple of wooden benches, you know, different level, 2 different levels.
How many people could fit in there? How many women would be in the
I
sauna
don't
with you?
remember because me, I was on the floor, like I told you, I was closest to the floor I could get because I couldn't stand it. And but my aunt Fina had a sauna, and they built the sauna before they built the house, you know.
So
So
that's the story. So it's true.
yeah, and that sauna we would go to pretty much all the time when my mother was in town. We would go see Aunt Fina, and which I called her Auntie Koski. Well, her last name was Koski. So and they had a farm, and they had this sauna, and I have pictures of that sauna. I don't know if I've ever sent them to you. The wood, the wood on it, and it was like so. The wood was so old. I mean, the boards were gigantic. You know that the sauna was built, you know, with. And then there was a stream, and my mother would run out and go jump in the stream, and that I was just like, you know, I was a young girl, and I was, oh my goodness, you're naked, you're going outside, oh my god, you know, that was to me just, oh, you didn't do that. I
So
would,
when you did the sauna, everyone was without clothes. The women, when the women were
yeah,
together, they were
oh
naked.
sure, yeah, yeah, yeah. As my mother's I mean, grandma and grandpa and all the kids went to sauna together, you know, when they were young. Everybody, the boys and the girls and grandma and grandpa, they all went to sauna together. I mean, it was very normal for my, you know, I mean, for all of us to take our clothes off and go in the sauna. It was no big deal. And I always discouraged my mother was always so, she could never find a friend that would go to a sauna with her because they didn't want to take their clothes off in front of, and she never like, what's wrong with that? she she could never figure that one out. But anyway, we would, you know, we'd all jump in there together, but the women would all go together, and then the men would go after them. And they'd ply me with food and everything else. And, you know, and I always had, you know,
How did people feel after the sauna? Were they very relaxed?
oh yeah, yeah. All the ladies would sit around in the kitchen and talk and finish, and I didn't know what was going on. And they just feed me food, and I ate everything, and they thought I was real cute because I never complained. You never complained to grandma if you didn't want to eat anything. You never said, I don't eat that. Eat. It was eat. You eat that.
Well, I think I talked to a gentleman from Finland and he said that's definitely, probably the older generations have sort of memory family stories of the famines that, the Great Famine hit Finland between 1865 and 1868, and it killed 1 out of every 10 Finnish people, or what was then Finland. So there's probably a lot of stories that someone her age would have heard from her parents about starvation.
That might have been one of the reasons they immigrated to the United States too. You know,
Yeah.
it was they
Well, I'm still learning the history, but what was happening was you had um, certain industries were collapsing, like the tar industry, and then land wasn't available for the poor farmers, and so they needed a place to go, and it was sort of consolidation of agriculture and modernization and famine all these forces pushing a large number of people then to seek opportunity somewhere else. And so then you had the opportunities with those shipping lines that would take people from Vasa, which was a busy port, that took a lot of the immigrants. That wasn't very far in terms of as the crow flies, but back in the day, you probably had to take a horse and it took a couple days to get to Vasa. It's about 70, 80 kilometers away from the farming villages where they're from. And a lot of people, a lot of Finnish immigrants from South Ostrobothnia, where the majority of many Finns that came to Michigan and Minnesota, that's farming area, and they would have probably left through Vasa or Turku.
And I think they came through Canada too. They came
Yep.
in through the Canadian border. They didn't go through New York. So they
Yep.
went right into the UP probably.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that would almost make sense in terms of how to get there. And lots of Finns settled in Ontario as well. So quite a number were just across the lake on the other side.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And so I've been following some Canadians who are Canadian Finnish Canadians, and they've gone back to Finland and they've started finding their heritage. And there's a Finnish Canadian guy who moved back to Helsinki, and he's trying to learn Finnish in his 50s. And so there's a lot of Finnish Canadians as well, like us in the USA, who are just sort of learning later in life the family heritage and stories. So that's common.
Well,
So
you do know that every place, I think it's every year, there's some place in the United States where Finns gather, and usually where there's a concentration of Finns. So back in 2014,
yeah,
I went back to the UP because it was in Houghton, Hancock, and I stayed with my cousin who was, I don't know, he's like 15, 18 years older than I was. And he'd drive me around, and we would and I'd take him out to dinner every night, and we would have fish every night. It was great. I loved it. And I saw my former friend Mary Aho, who used to live next door to me. She was my playmate, and she bought my grandmother's house, and she lives in my grandmother's house. So she definitely upgraded it from when grandma lived there, because there
yeah.
was no toilet on the second floor. We had to piss in a pot. And then if you wanted to go, serious bathroom, the toilet was in the basement. And then there was the shower head like in the middle of the basement floor, and you'd stand on some wooden plaques, and then it was, like water, and there was nothing around you but the basement. And it was very primitive. And grandma had an outhouse too. And she also had what was considered I guess a garage, but it housed her loom. She had a loom, and she used to make rag rugs all the time. And I have one rag rug that she gave me, and I put it away because it started to fall apart, and I didn't want to use it because I couldn't wash it in the washing machine anymore. I was afraid I was going to lose it, so I put it aside. I have it in my closet, but I don't bring it out at all. It's too bad.
Okay.
Sister, however, used all the rag rugs she had. She just used them up. She had them all over the place, and she doesn't have any now. So,
All right. Oh,
but
wow. Wow, that's I didn't know anything about that story. So
yeah,
um
she would spend hours. She'd go outside and get old clothes and strip them, put them into strips and tie them into knots, and make and she had a whole color arrangement that she would do. And
wow.
she would go and make these rugs. And that was, it was just amazing. And it wasn't a very big loom. Maybe about I would say probably about 3 feet across. Maybe that
Yeah.
was the widest it could be, and then any length. But so grandma made rugs, and she would always, when she was outside, she would cover her hair. She never let her hair she thought it was bad the sun was bad for her hair. So she would always wear a kerchief over her hair. I don't anyway, but
Do- what quick question, what kind of jobs did she have? How did she make money after her husband died?
I think her children contributed to her maintenance, basically. She did have occasional jobs because I know when she was in Detroit one summer, she worked for, do you know, Sanders? In Detroit, there's a chocolate maker named Sanders.
Okay.
Sanders' family, their woman who worked for them was a Finnish woman, a friend of my grandmother's, and she wanted to go back to Finland for a summer. So grandma worked her job. She worked in the Sanders home, and we got to visit the home, and it was a very, it wasn't like a huge house, but it was certainly bigger than anything we knew, and so we got to walk around, don't touch anything. So we got to see the house where the Sanders lived. That was a big deal. And that was
Okay.
I know that grandma did. But I don't know that she really worked. She just, the kids supported her.
Now then she then moved in because I know I looked again in the census records that she was then living in Detroit. You said with family in the 1950s, right? It was three generations of households living together, right?
Right, right. That was my Aunt Alice and my Uncle Art's house, and they lived on the main floor, and we lived upstairs. And there was a kitchen, a little kitchen, and a little dining room, and a bedroom, and a living room, and a bathroom. And grandma and my sister would sleep in the bedroom, and me and my mother would sleep on my parents' bed in the living room. And then we moved. My mother bought a house in Oak Park with my cousin Jean, who was Alice's daughter. And Alice and her Jean and her husband Albert and their little boy Larry, and my mother and my sister and me lived in a 3-bedroom house in Oak Park for a few years. And my mother remarried, and she got the house, and they moved out and moved farther out of the city, Jean and Alan Larry. But it was and that was a big deal, to have a house all of our own. But when
So
I was
how do you recall how long you all had like three generations of people living together in Detroit?
well, it was when after my father died, then we moved in upstairs, and then we moved to Oak Park about 1950. So it was like from 1943 to 1950.
Okay.
And so there were indeed and 3 generations, and Jean and Alan Larry lived in the basement. Albert built a house, a little house for them down in the basement. So I mean, basically, it was I had a whole bunch of people to see and talk to and go to. There was Aunt Alice and Uncle Art and cousin June, and on the first floor, and then me and grandma and my mother and my sister, and then in the basement, Jean and Al and Larry. So we would
So I
all.
saw some pictures of Grandma Nelson that were shared. I think one of them was from Finland where she was like older and in someone's backyard. So that my assumption is that was probably Detroit, where she was sitting in someone's backyard and she was
What was
probably
happening?
in her 70s or 80s by that point.
Yeah, that was Winnie's. That was Winnie and I just forgot
Bill.
my. Yeah, I know, but we never called him that. That was never his name. Deke. He was called Deke by everybody. It's like Struby. Struby was never called Frederick. He was called Struby because as a boy, he was called Strawberry because he had
Okay.
very red hair. So Strawberry eventually got corrupted into Struby. And Struby was what he was called the rest of his life by
Okay.
everybody.
Okay.
And
All
when he
right.
was,
So you're saying that maybe some of those photos were at Deke and Winnie's home in Detroit?
yeah, I think so. I think that one of grandma sitting in the backyard was in their backyard in Detroit. Yeah. And because we would visit often, my mother and Winnie were very close. They were very close in age. They were about a year apart. So
Yep.
we visit them all the time. Okay.
You know, one thing I'm just noticing looking at your face are these big old cheekbones, right? So
Yeah.
now I know where mine come from.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, is that a surprise that I look this way?
No. No, and I know my face looks very red on camera. I don't
I
know
think
what,
you look fine.
but I'm it's not normally this red, but I don't know.
I found this I was reading this book called the Finns of Michigan. It was written by a history professor that I think was associated with Wayne State University, and it was quoting some sources that were written about the Finnish immigrants in Michigan, and there was some negative things said about them at the time in the mid 1900s, and one of them said they had these large foreheads, and you can't escape who they are because of their large foreheads and their high cheekbones. And then I shared this sort of comment with a friend of mine. She's actually Native American, but from Canada. And she said you should be proud of your cheekbones. You know, you want them so high you can hang a coat hanger from them. So it's a sign of distinction. So there you go.
I just everybody in my family looks like this. So
I know. I mean, it is interesting. The family resemblances. I mean, I think my nose is more on the other side of the family, the Deke side. So that's from his
Owens
grandmother,
and the Owens side.
Addie Mae Baker. So
Yeah.
um, so Hilma, we were talking about Hilma. So Hilma passed away pretty late. She passed away in 1969. Do
Yeah.
you remember that?
Oh yeah, she was living up north with my Aunt Alice. They were living together. Alice moved up there, and that's when she died. So how old was she? She was 86.
80.
I
She
think
was in
80.
her, I mean, so she was born, again, looking at it, 1886. So she would have been 82,
I thought she was older than that.
maybe older. Okay. Almost. So 1886. And then she passed away in 1969.
79. I don't know. She was in her late, I think she was in her mid to late 80s.
Was she healthy?
She was overweight. She was a big woman. My grandmother was uh, very stout, like very, there was a lot to her. She was a big woman. I wouldn't say that ultimately, I think when she died, they considered her obese. She was probably over 200 pounds, but she was a tall woman too. She wasn't all, well, not tall, because most Finns are not really humongous, but I would say she was probably about 5'6", maybe.
Okay.
And my highest I ever got was 5'2", and now I'm 5 feet. So
So
my
was she strong? Was she a strong woman?
oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, because grandma, made bread all the time. So all that kneading, you needed muscle to do.
Really?
Sure. So, and she made bread all the time on her wood burning stove.
Wow.
And, yeah, she would turn out the most amazing things. And jam, of course, we always had jam all through. We always picked enough berries that there would be jam all through the year until the next season, berry picking time. So
So was that just because it's a hobby, or is it because of necessity?
necessity. It was a necessity.
Wow.
It was strawberries in June in the UP and in Michigan. And then in July, you got maybe a smattering of raspberries.
Okay.
So there was a little bit less raspberry jam, but lots of strawberry jam. and maybe a blueberry here and there if she could get her hands on blueberries, but mostly strawberry and raspberry.
All right. So again, so you just only knew you never got a chance to meet so again, your grandfather is Isaac, right? Isaac was
Yeah,
your grandfather. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. All right.
And
Did you
he
ever hear
died in
stories
19.
where he came from or anything about his family?
No, never. I never knew anything about well, my great grandpa. No. He was never talked about. By that time, he had been dead he died in 1934.
Yeah.
I was 9 years later. Um, and he wasn't talked about. Maybe among the siblings, maybe about with my mother and Winnie and John and Struby and Alice, maybe they talked about him, but
Yeah.
they spoke in Finnish. So I didn't know what they were talking about.
Was there any, do you think some sort of like, was he like not good to Hilma, or did he have issues with his life, or was he
Oh,
unhappy?
they had three kids right in a row, bam, 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 right after they got married. After John was born, those three kids came, everybody, her five children were very close in age. They were maybe about, there'd be about a year apart between um, Winnie and my mother. They were about a year and a half apart.
Yep,
And I don't know
that's
about
correct. I see, what is it?
Struby. I
Uh,
was born.
okay, so Winnie was 1909, and then Siggy was 1911,
Right. Yeah.
and then Walfred was 1908.
Oh, yeah. Right. So, she had John. When was John's birth year? When was he born?
Looking right now, I gotta find it. It's just 1906.
Yeah, see. And
And
then
then is it, what is it? As Alice was 1904.
right, she's the first kid. Oh, four
Okay.
and oh were the first husband, and then from Uncle Struby, Winnie, and Sigrid. Those
When did Alice pass away? Do you remember?
She moved to her daughter Joyce lived in Arizona. She and her husband moved to Arizona probably in the 60s, maybe even before that. He was some kind of an executive in, I don't know what kind of business, but so they lived, that's where they came from. And Joyce was never terribly close to any of us, and certainly not in age, because she was certainly older,
Yeah.
definitely the older than me. Um, I was closest to Jack and Jill. Basically, they were, we would see Jack and Jill and Winnie and Deke, and
Yep.
in Detroit. That was
Okay.
more or less our family.
All right.
And once my mother remarried, Grandma moved back up north to live in her house. And then I would spend summers all summer with Grandma. So and to me, that was just like heaven. My mother, when I was in my 30s, my mother said to me one time, "I'm so sorry I had to leave you with Grandma up north." I said, "Are you kidding? That was the best time of my life. I was free. I was free. Nobody, the point was, you come home when you get hungry. That was it. Otherwise, we were out playing and running around the hills and Ripley, and nobody paid, no one worried about kids then.
Yeah.
Nobody locked their doors.
Yeah.
It was a different world.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
even from Detroit too, but and probably half of Ripley was probably related to us. We were.
Yeah. Yeah. So getting back to Ripley, which is for folks who don't know, right next to Hancock, right by the canal there. So, did it, when you were up there, when you were visiting, did it feel Finnish to you? Was there a sense of Finnish identity in the
Oh my
community?
goodness, yes. I mean, everybody was Finnish, and you heard the language all over the place. I mean, the lady next door, can't remember her name, but she was kind of stern, and she never wanted us climbing in her tree, but we always went climbed in her tree anyway. And but the older people, my grandmother spoke Finnish all the time to everybody.
Wow.
Um, I mean, she never learned English that well.
Yeah.
Um, and at one point, one year, for some reason, my mother had a boxed cake that she would make. It was a big deal back in the early 50s to get a box of anything like a cake mix. You just didn't do that. You made all your own. So this was a cake mix, and I really liked it. And so I brought some boxes with me, but I had to read the instructions to grandma. I would tell her what to do. It was simple, like, pour in some milk and water or whatever and mix it up
Yep.
and put it. And but of course grandma regulated everything in her wood burning stove. So there was, she just knew what the temperature was, what was right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thinking about that, so obviously you were exposed to Finnish in your home. You took the saunas with the family. Did the sauna tradition survive after Winnie's generation? Did the next generation do them or not?
Well, we lived in Detroit, and in Detroit we did go to some backyard saunas
Okay.
um,
Okay.
in the city of Detroit, and where they were, I don't know, but I know that we would occasionally go for a sauna, and that was it. All you could do was go for a sauna. There was nothing to, well, you just pour cold water on yourself if you
Right.
wanted to,
Right.
and that was
So
it.
so
But
that so I've read about backyard saunas from some of the Finns who live there. So that's a real thing.
yeah, yeah, and I don't know where they were. I mean, we're going to sauna, okay. I just go.
Okay. Did you ever continue sauna after you became an adult?
Yes, I did. I
You
did.
did.
Yeah, sure. I would go with a couple of friends of mine, a male friend of mine, Skip, and we found a sauna somewhere in Detroit, and we would go. We would go to sauna. Um, Skip and I we were very, very good friends, and we would go to the beach, and we would go to the nude beach in on the beach in along the ocean, in the Atlantic Ocean. There was
Okay.
a beach area, and that's where we went. So anybody who came with us, they were at the nude beach. So everybody got naked, it was no big deal.
Well, I think for the Finns, it's less of a big deal. For the rest of the world, it's a little more problematic.
But here you were talking about, the 60s and 70s, and my friends were kind of, like new age. Hey, what the hell? Let's all. And I had a friend in Detroit who we went to her house. She had lived in a house with about 3 or 4 other people, and they had a sauna in the basement. And so we saw a movie, The Gang's All Here, and then we went back to their house, and we were sitting around, and all of a sudden, uh, her name was, we called her Bizarro, and she was standing in the kitchen saying naked, and she said, "Well, come on, who is going to go down to the sauna with me?" So we all said, "Well, okay," and a whole bunch of us who never thought we'd get naked together, we all got naked together. So, and that's where I met my best friend Sandy, in that sauna, and she and I
Okay.
really good friend. She walked in and she said, "Hi, I'm Sandy." She was kind of a bouncy person. And so, um, and we found out years later that that was from that experience that night, I was leaving my husband to go live with my boyfriend. And she was leaving her boyfriend to go live with another boyfriend. So, it was, it was quite an evening for us, both.
What city was this in?
In Detroit, yeah.
Okay.
So, so our friend Biz did have a sauna in her basement, and all of her friends were invited to come to the sauna. And
And
she was,
this was what year approximately?
oh, early 60s,
Okay, so
60s,
people were still doing saunas at that time.
yeah,
So, all
60s,
right.
up to, yeah,
But that's
yeah.
fascinating because now, of course, saunas have come back. They're now trending again. They're now sort of popular. So it had to die down for several decades, I guess, as the Finns became assimilated, and then saunas just sort of continued on the margins. Now they're
Yeah,
back.
good, good. I'm glad to hear it.
I
Um,
I love them. I think I was born to take them. The very first sauna I took was in college. I of course didn't know I was Finnish-American at the time. It was a college locker room, so the men's side and the women's side, and the men's side had a very simple electric sauna with just two benches, so two levels, two benches, both sides, and it could hold about 6 or 8 people. And I took them all the time, and I loved them. I love them.
well, I learned that in New York, there was a place you could go to. It was like a spa, but they had a Russian steam
Anya,
room. They had a sauna, and
yeah.
I was there. I remember going there and spending the entire day because it was like a snow day, and nobody was doing anything. And I went, and this was down in the East Village, and they may still exist. I don't know. But they had, and the sauna was gigantic. I mean, they had 3 or 4 layers of. I mean, you could probably get 15 people in this sauna,
Okay.
or maybe more.
Okay. Okay.
And everybody, pretty much they all wore their bathing suits, that kind of thing. It was not, I mean, but you could go, they had ladies' day. And so this was a ladies' day that I went, and I went to, and I walked around, and then you lie down on the sofa and you take a nap, and then you go back to the sauna. And um, it was a great way to spend a very winter day in New York
Yeah. Of
City.
course. Yeah. There's no better way on a cold day than to get nice and warm. Yeah, I had some very nice saunas when I was in Finland during winter, and it was great. With our relative, with Merja and her husband Jarmo, they have a very nice sauna in their house, in their bathroom, because all the homes have saunas in their bathrooms, and they're great. And just took the sauna with him, and then we went out in the backyard and sat in his backyard, and there was snow was several feet high, and just sat outside in the snow and steamed. And then it was sort of getting warm, and then we would hear the snow sort of fall off their roof, these big snow sounds. And it was one of the most peaceful nights I can remember. It was beautiful.
Yeah,
It was just a great way to spend a Saturday night. It was perfect.
yeah,
I
great.
just felt so relaxed.
Right. You really slept well after a sauna too. It was
Yeah.
um
I mean, did Grandma, did Hilma, did she still do saunas late in her life?
probably
Okay.
oh, I'm sure she did, because she was up north.
Okay.
Uh
All right.
sure her friends, someone would come and get her, and there was like, and there were saunas all over the place, and along the water,
Yeah.
along the out of the cities, the big city of Hancock and Houghton, which believe me is not very big. But everybody had a sauna along the river.
I've got to get up there. I have not had a chance to visit Hancock yet, and so it's on my list to do. And I want to spend at least the day there just exploring, or two. So I'd probably fly into Minneapolis and then drive up. I think Minneapolis is a lot closer than Detroit.
Oh yeah.
So I have no reason to go to Detroit now, unfortunately. I mean, I've been there, but that's a faster way, and so I can get up there with a rental. And
You
I'd
know,
like to just sort of, I'd like to see the house too.
the distance, well, if you go, knock on the door, because that's my friend Mary. I can't remember what her last name is now, but if she's still there, and say that you're related to Gail.
I can do that, Gail. I will do that. I promise. Yeah. Yeah.
And Second Street has changed.
Yeah,
They call it, may call it Second Street, but all the numbers are different.
yeah, they
They're
are.
like 4 or 5 digits long. But Grandma's house had it used to be green and white. The top part was green shingles, and then the
Yeah.
bottom was white. And I don't know if Mary and her husband kept it that color or not, but
Okay. So one question. So you've never been to Finland, have you?
no, I never
Okay.
have.
All right.
I've always tried to convince my sister that we should go, but now we're too old.
Okay. Did your sister, so your sister never went?
No, no.
Okay. All right.
Sister is
Well,
86.
so yeah, so I guess I sort of like picked up the tradition from John and Vi.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So it's just our relatives were very, very happy to see their American relative when I came. So they've been wonderful, and I'm in touch with them now for my next visit. And so just getting the details sorted out, and I'll stay again in Tampere, I know, for a day, and just looking forward to going back again and maybe learning a little more Finnish this time. I've done badly, so
Yeah, good for you. I never got the hang of it. My sister can remember more of Finnish.
yeah.
She
Well, I
did.
mean, she was at the age where she's you learn language permanently. It implants into your language memory at an early age rapidly.
We always say to each other when something terrible happens or something, we always say, "Voi go here." That's what Grandma used to say. Voi go here. I have no idea what it means, but whatever. It's like, "Oh, voi go here."
Did she say perkele?
No.
Okay. Well, I mean, like curse the devil, but the translation also means shit. So,
A lot of Finns would visit the UP. Uh, Finnish Finns, Finns from Finland would
yep.
visit the up north because the language was so insular. It never evolved like it did in Finland.
Yeah.
So when they go to the northern peninsula up north, or probably even Minnesota, they hear a different kind of
Dialect.
Finnish.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Interesting.
it's the old Finnish, because it never changed the way it
Yep.
did. So I know that now I would say nisua, Finnish coffee cake, but I think that now they say nisu. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Well, they also have like spoken Finnish and then written Finnish, and then the spoken Finnish shortens all the words too. So remember, like Finnish has two different versions of Finnish. So when you learn the language formally, you learn the written Finnish, but then when you speak it, it truncates some of the words.
Wow. Yeah.
So you have to learn both when you learn the language.
Yeah. I mean, it's impossible when you look at a word that's, 25 letters long. You know,
Well, yeah, you just have to understand the logic, and then once you understand the logic, I think it's actually probably very logical. There's, I think it maybe I don't know. I started learning some of the ways that you understand like verb, noun, adverb, adjective placement, and how they do that, and how they conjugate, and it begins to start making sense. I think language doesn't make sense until you learn it, and then it starts making sense, and that takes time and effort. So,
it was all oral Finnish,
yep,
for
yep,
me.
yep,
Uh,
yep. Great.
uh,
Right.
but
Well,
being up north it was just a blessing for me to be at that age. When I was maybe 13 or 14, I wanted to stay in Detroit because, the boys were around and I was more
yep.
interested in.
You grew up.
Yeah, I grew up, and then that was the end of my visits to up north. But I loved it when I was there and as a kid because I was free, I was just I didn't have to. No one said, don't go do this, don't go do that, don't go. You were just, go out and have a good time, go have fun.
Well, anyway, so I just really appreciated just connecting, and this is great for me because I learned some stuff, and it's this hidden world, and it's new and it's fascinating to me. So thank you for sharing that, Gail.
Well, I'm glad I finally figured it all out. You helped me
You
figure out.
did. You did. We did great. Thank you again. Kiitos vielä kerran for spending time with us today on the Finding Finland podcast. Be sure to visit us for more conversations about all things Finland. Remember, you can find all the podcast episodes on your favorite podcasting platform by visiting the Finding Finland